podcast show, I wanted to make sure you knew about my physical therapist entrepreneur course. If you want to learn how to get started adding additional income streams as a physical therapist, writer, author, social media video host, trainer, consultant, or course educator, this course is for you. Head to brian-schwabe-dpt.teachable.com and use promo code podcast for 60% off today. Hey everyone, welcome to Brian's Corners podcast show. I'm your host, Brian Schwabe, and in today's episode, we have Meredith Caston, who is also known as the non-clinical PT. She's a physical therapist. Meredith, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I learned the pronunciation of your last name too now.
Yeah, a lot of people say Schwab. It's Schwabe. I wish it was Schwab. I would be better off, I think. Well, anyways, thank you so much for coming on the show. I know we've talked in the past before. We've met. I've really been a fan of your non-clinical PT for a long time. But for those of us that are listening to this and watching this, can you tell us a little bit about your background and how you got to becoming more of a founder and CEO of your company?
Sure. Thank you. So it all started when I was doing a second career as a physical therapist, basically. And, I think anyone who goes into it as a career changer thinks this is going to be it. This is going to be the right pick for me. I had been a web and graphic designer in my previous career, and I liked it, but I didn't like being glued to a desk all day. And I think I just was kind of immature in general and didn't really know what I wanted out of life. And so I ended up getting injured at the company party. Here, throwback to my immaturity, got drunk at the company party, injured myself, and then ended up getting sent to PT. And at that point, I did not know what PT was. I had heard of it once because my ex-boyfriend's friend was going to become a PT. And that was the extent of it. And so all of a sudden, I was going and getting PT for this nagging back injury that by the time I went and actually got my PT, it had been like 6, maybe probably 12 weeks. And I've been really having a lot of back pain. And it was for a 25-year-old, I was just like, oh man, I'm too young for this. And so anyway, I made this miraculous improvement. And that was all I needed, was to be like, I've got to be that person. I want to fix people like this. You get to walk around, you get to talk with people. I left out of the fact that I was always getting in trouble at my first job for like distracting people because I talked too much. And so I knew I wanted a career where you could talk with people. And then it's just kind of funny that I ended up doing what I'm doing now. But yeah, so I ended up going into PT and found at 3 years that it was just not what I had hoped it would be. And it wasn't that I didn't love, I'll put it this way, it wasn't that I didn't enjoy treating patients. It's that I had a hard time doing it 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, and then taking home all that documentation afterward, and taking home the emotional burden, and taking home really the physical burden. And I had been warned by people that it is a taxing job physically and emotionally, but I think it's really easy to go in I was 28 when I made the decision. I think it's really easy to go in and say, yeah, that's fine, I'll take care of it. And then I was 31 when I got out. And then by the time it started to really get to me, it was like 33, 34. And so I think you start to really have a better idea of what you want to do with your life as you get older, and what you can handle doing for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. Realistically, I mean, more like 10 hours a day when you get documentation included in there. So I started realizing it was not the right fit and freaking out because I was like, no one's going to ever hire me. I've done 2 careers. This is ridiculous. I couldn't go back to web and graphic design because all my portfolio is super dated. And then people were like, what the hell? You went to PT school. What are you going to do? Come back and fix our backs. And so it was kind of a cluster. I was trying to get jobs. I would like apply to places through staffing agencies. And meanwhile, I was still working as a PT, but I'd be like applying to all these jobs on the side and never getting anything back. One time I got one resume taken by a staffing agency, and I had this terrible marketing job for like 2 weeks where it was pretty much data entry. And then they laid me off at the end of the year because they didn't have budget. And I was like, all right, cool. And so, I mean, it was just one of these things where it was almost a comedy of errors. And then after a certain point, I talked with my sister, who's a career counselor and a career coach. She's licensed professional, works in Texas. And she was the one who was like, you realize why you're not getting anybody looking at your resume is because you're using a clinical resume for non-clinical jobs. And we had kind of a come to Jesus moment where she really talked to me and was like, you're coming at this from 2 careers in deep now. And you've never really gone anywhere in your PT career because you've just like jumped from job to job, not being happy. And so at that point is when I got more serious about things, got more strategic about things, and I was able to land a rehab liaison job, a PRN. And at that point is when I launched New Grad Physical Therapy with my ex-coworker, Brett. And that's probably when you and I first connected, was when I was running New Grad Physical Therapy, which is now part of the greater company. They owned it the whole time, but didn't technically own it. It's a long story, but Covalent Careers now owns it fully. And so if you search New Grad Physical Therapy, I think it goes straight to Covalent Careers. So it's like the super, super long, attempting to be short version. But basically I launched NonClinical PT when I left Covalent Careers, because I had so many people who were reaching out when I was doing all of that. When I was building NGPT and my name would be on these emails and they would see my name on articles, people were like, I want to do that. I want to write. I want to do something else with my degree. And so I set up my site when I was leaving Covalent Careers, kind of like, there's got to be somewhere to send these people. And then it's just grown from there.
Yeah, that's super cool. And that's exactly how we met, though, because I was down in San Diego and I just wanted to come by because I think we all were talking. But you and me linked up a little bit later when I started going into more writing of articles.
Yeah.
So I know I talked with you about that, and I've been able to push that writing a little bit further, books, writing, things like that. So I think, what you said earlier, though, is what a lot of PTs feel after a few years is they get a little bit discouraged because of the way that the PT industry is. Now, this is a generalization, of course, and there's definitely good companies, things like that. But I think what I see a lot of times is there's a lot of PTs that want those non-clinical opportunities. What, from the people you've talked to, because you have a big Facebook group on top of just your audience in general, what have you seen has been the main themes for why people are trying to get into non-clinical work?
I think you hit the nail on the head when you said there are a number of reasons, but it tends to hit about 3 years out when you realize more or less that it doesn't matter how good of a company you work for, you're going to be judged on your productivity 9 times out of 10. Even if it's the best company ever, so much of what you're rewarded for, judged by, all of those factors, it's going to be how many patients you treat, and not just that, how much you bill for them. And so for a lot of people, I think they say, and myself included, and I'm sure you too, just based on what you've done in your career, you go into things and you're like, I'm going to be the best PT ever. I'm going to fix people. I'm going to get all these certifications, and then I'm going to get them in, get them out, and they're going to be better. And then you get into a job and you realize it's actually the opposite of what they want you to do. They don't really care if you become better. And I'm saying they, like you said, it's not all clinics, hashtag not all clinics, but the thing is, there are a vast majority that are like this. And so they'll say, well, we want to keep them on the schedule. And then there's a lot of pressure to keep people around. And so there's no incentive to get better at what you do. And then if there's no incentive to get better at what you do, then what incentive is there to get letters behind your name other than just the marketing aspect for the clinic? And then many of them are like, patients don't know what those letters mean, so why do we really care? And plus they also recognize that a lot of therapists are very internally motivated and are achievement based. We can get into that in a second, but a lot of people are type 3, that's the achiever on the Enneagram, that come to me. And so they'll have these inclinations that they want to grow, they want to get better, they want to achieve, they want to build their careers, and they want to be rewarded for getting better. And so there's really no place in a lot of these clinical environments to, quote, get better, because the better you become, then like the worse your numbers are, in the sense of, you're always going to have to be getting new patients then, because if you discharge that one after 4 visits because he or she was better, then you got to get someone else in. And so it's very much set up not in a way to reward you for growing. And I think that was what I picked up on really early. And I'm not the most ambitious person out there, but I need a lot of variety and stimulation. And that's the other factor that I think leads people to want a change. There are things like money. There are things like respect. These all go into it. But the main two that I find are that people feel very stifled, or they feel kind of burned out, or they feel like they just aren't getting stimulated enough. So and part of burnout, I think, is not getting stimulated enough, just feeling like there's not enough interesting changes or challenges going on. You've seen 25 rotator cuff repairs, and then you realize that you've got like 30 years ahead of you of all these rotator cuff repairs. Or if you're in acute care, same thing. I mean, you see all these different diagnoses, but then the nurse calls down and is like, can you walk the patient? So,
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
No, listen, I think you're 100% correct. I know that when I wanted to start to branch out a little bit, it was more because I had PT school debt, sports residency debt, and I was very achievement based, right? So I love the clinical side of things, and I still do the clinical side of things 40 hours a week because I enjoy that. But on weekends and free time, right, I've gotten my schedule to a point where I'm 4 days a week in the clinic, but the other 3 days a week, I can do my own thing, which is consulting, training, educating, writing, whatever it may be, because that was how I wanted to pay off my student debt, and also just to stimulate my own self, right?
Yeah.
So I think a lot of people are in that boat over time because they reach, if they're money driven, then they reach that threshold. If they're, like you said, not stimulated, then they want something else. But I think a lot of them don't know how to do it, right? And you've built your brand since you've left Covalent over the last few years into something really big. Do you have suggestions for those that are interested in breaking out into, let's say, building their own brand, and starting that point? Because I think a lot of people are confused on how to start that.
Sure. I always say the best thing you can possibly do is have a problem that you are so hell-bent on solving that nothing will get in your way. And that was kind of how this all started. I remember sitting at this very table just on the other side of it, and I was fielding like my umpteenth email of the day. This was right before I was leaving Covalent, and I was catching up on emails because I was always behind on emails because of that, because I was constantly getting, like, every time we would send an email blast, 20 people would write back being like, hey. And so I was replying to this one person, and I remember this person had fabulous background that I could see, I think it was a he, could have gone non-clinical really well, but I didn't know what to do. And I didn't really know where to tell him to go, because I was like, I mean, this is what I did. These are the mistakes I made, or the good things that I did. And let me know if you need any help. And I just remember closing my laptop and looking at my husband and being like, I just wish I could send these people somewhere. And that was when he looked back and he was like, I don't think there's anywhere for you to send them. You kind of have to be that person. So you either you either like step up. Whoops, there goes my light. Sorry. You either step up and become that person. Can you see me okay without this?
Yes, I can. There you go.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, you either step up and become that person, or you just let someone else do it. And my problem was that I wanted so badly to help these people, and I was like really emotionally invested in them. By this point, it had been over a year that I've been fielding these emails, and then before that, just feeling it personally for the longest time, of that desire to want to do more. And so I think it was just one of those things. So as far as branding went, I did have that graphic and web design background. So I had some of the fundamentals as far as white space. I think that's what a lot of people who don't have the design background forget, is that the eye wants white space. I'm looking at your background and you have a lot of white space behind you, and that's great. So people focus on you instead of, you can see on me that there's some white space, but there's this mirror that could probably distract people, and there are the blinds. And so the eye wants white space. And so that's one of the big like design principles I give people. But my business recommendation is just to find a problem that you truly, truly, truly believe you can solve, you want to solve, you can't sleep till you solve it. And if anybody else solves it, or if anybody else tries to solve it, they won't do as good of a job as you, because you just care more than they do. And I'm sure that's like not the right business advice for some people, but for me, that has been what has kept me going this whole time, and taken it from what was really a passion project initially to all of a sudden it took off. I mean, and I think the reason it did take off is that I didn't focus on money for a really long time until it got to the point where I was spending more time on that than my full-time job. Because when I left Covalent Careers, I did leave for a full-time writing job. And I did that for like 5 months. And then as the non-clinical PT just grew and grew and grew, it was getting to the point where I was just like never sleeping. So
Yeah. And that's that's kind of how we talk too, is you were telling me about how you're building a course behind it because you had all this information you were trying to to get out on top of your website, which is organizing everything. And I think
Yeah.
that's what people need. People need organization. Can you tell us a little bit about your courses and how you went about building some of that?
Oh, sure. As far as creating the course, my friend Emma actually is the reason that I got the idea to do the course, because I wasn't initially thinking about it that way. I was initially running this blog, and also when I was running New Grad Physical Therapy with Brett, he and Matt from Covalent Careers, they were doing all the businessy stuff of the site. I was the woman who did the writing. I was like the content strategist. I came up with the article ideas. So I didn't know anything about how to monetize a website, and I didn't care. I was like, that's not my thing. And so I had to learn it all. And at the beginning, I was doing coaching calls. The first thing I did was I started charging for coaching calls. And I was starting to notice these themes coming up over and over and over. And the same questions were coming up over and over. And my friend Emma was like, have you thought about doing an online course? And I had not thought about doing an online course because I didn't even know that was a thing. And so then I started really thinking about, okay, how would this work if this became a course? And I wanted to make sure I did it right. So I talked with my sister, she is the career counselor, career coach, and she had a lot of recommendations for just like activities and worksheets. And then my parents are both educators, so they they gave me plenty of feedback along the way for just, Facebook lives and things that I did. And they would, from educators' perspectives, they would always be weighing in on, slow down, which has never been my forte, but talk a little more slowly, Meredith, and just things like that. And so then I took a few bits of advice from Pat Flynn and Amy Porterfield. They both have phenomenal podcasts on creating courses. I don't think you need to take a course on how to create a course, because you can learn it all yourself. And I just don't think you need it. But if you want to spend the money, you can take a course on how to create a course. But I ended up just, from the podcast that I listened of Amy's and Pat Flynn's, I just got a really good idea of how I wanted to structure things. The idea that they say you need to use a system, and you can't just be, 25 chapters and then expect people to stay engaged. You have to say, okay, in step 1, we're going to have these sub chapters. In step 2, so everything I put out, I try to create it in a very sort of structured way so that people don't get overwhelmed. They don't feel discouraged. They feel excited. I make them kind of dorky because that's what I am. And I ended up using the platform called Teachable, which I really like. It's not perfect, but I've been happy with them. And I find it to be the most affordable blend of sort of like the features that you want and the ability to manage the books the way I want to. And then also, not be super expensive. You'll hear people talking about Kajabi, and Kajabi is so expensive. And you also have to run your entire website on Kajabi if you do it that way. And I'm a WordPress girl, so I might be getting like a little too geeky for people, so you can cut me off.
No, listen, I use Teachable as well. So that's, I found it to be super easy to use.
Yeah.
I have no background in any of the stuff you have background in. So, it's great to hear that someone who has a background like you is using Teachable as well for the same reasons that I chose, because I've seen Kajabi as well. It was just too expensive.
Yeah. I don't think it's worth it. I've heard people say things like, I forget how it's been put, but it's like, it's Kajabi or nothing. And to me, that's crazy, because I don't want to give Kajabi all my money. Like, that's not how I roll. I want to reinvest it. And so, and also I like having my hands dirty in the website and fixing things. And that might be from the writer in me and the web designer and all of the stuff from my background. But WordPress doesn't even use HTML at this point, which is the coding language for that web designers use. And so the old version of WordPress, I would occasionally get into the back end and play with the like HTML code a little bit to fix things up. But with the newer version, it's so user friendly that it's like, I don't know. I think a lot of times people tried it 10 years ago and they were like, it's so hard to use. And then they don't want to try it again. And I want people to try WordPress again, because it's so much easier now, and it's so modifiable. And like you were saying, you use Teachable. And I know you've had your own website for years with the student physical therapist. And so it's nice when you already have a website that you don't have to move that whole site to something new where you're going to pay more, and then pay more in general for the name of Kajabi. So, but again, I haven't used Kajabi. I know people who use it and like it, but when they told me what they spend on it, I'm like, how are you staying afloat with that? You have to, So
yeah, no, and that's interesting, and I think that's where a lot of people are trying to figure out. Okay, if I do want to go the course creation route, where do I go? So this is good information for them, because then they at least have a starting point where they can go check out Pat Flynn's stuff. And
yeah.
right.
And they both recommend things, just to let you know. So they usually have some, like affiliate setup. So I always recommend with people, when you do anything, if someone isn't admitting that they are an affiliate, or they're not like sharing that with you right away, and they're trying to get you to sign up for something, like if I were to say, oh, I love Teachable, use the link below, and then I don't tell you, and I'm not saying that, but then if I were to give you a link and then not tell you that I was an affiliate, then I think that's kind of sketchy personally, and you're technically supposed to always disclose that. So there are going to be a lot of people out there recommending a lot of things. My biggest piece of advice is just to really do your homework and kind of look into things outside of what people are telling you, because you'll learn a lot more about the platform and whether it's for you. And that goes for whatever you decide to use for your tech.
Yeah, no, and that's good, because I think that's where a lot of people get tripped up. So to transition off of that, what are, because we've talked a little bit about writing and some of the WordPress stuff, a little bit about Teachable, of course creation. What other non-clinical opportunities have you found to be, I hate to use this word, lucrative, but I think that's a lot of things that people are interested in, including myself. And I know that's probably not a straightforward answer, but can you speak upon that a little bit from your experience?
Sure. Yeah. And I get that question a lot, which are the jobs that pay the most. And my answer is usually the jobs that are like the hardest, in the sense, not challenging intellectually necessarily the hardest, but they're the ones that make you work on nights and weekends. You travel a lot, you have to present to people. So for a lot of therapists, going from a full-time 8 to 5 job, we can complain about taking our stuff home and having to work 9 or 10 hours, but at least it's like we're working at home. So a lot of these jobs, just keep in mind, the more lucrative ones, there's a lot of travel or stress involved. But I found this, sales, DME type of representative roles tend to be the most lucrative. You're going to get a lot of money to start, and then you often will get commission-based incentives. So you'll find that sometimes account manager roles will cross over with sales. So people hear account manager or client services, and sometimes they think, oh, that's like a call center role. And it's a huge type of career track where there's a lot of overlap over sales roles. So quite a few account managers will make a lot of money, and people don't often think about that. And then another one is recruiting. If you decide that you want to, if you're the type who you really like being on the phone, you don't mind being on calls nights and weekends. Same goes for sales. You don't have to travel too much with recruiting, if at all, but in general, you have to be extremely self-motivated. So you're not going to be like, oh, they're not going to say, here's your pipeline of candidates. Now make sure that you have to be very hungry. You have to be very ambitious. You have to be extremely tenacious for sales jobs or recruiting jobs. And so the reason I like to say that they can be lucrative is that if you're not, then they can also not be lucrative. And it can be a really demoralizing experience for clinicians to go into those kinds of roles. So luckily there are some hybrids that I think are good fits for clinicians if they're not quite ready to say, go work at Stryker and just go into like the sales environment. Some people are, and it's great. But if you've got a little kid at home, or you've got some other reason that you don't want to travel, or you just don't want to be full on sales, there are roles at companies like Encompass called, I'm trying to remember what this one is called. Off the top of my head, I will think of it. But they're companies, these large chains that have a lot of roles, not just rehab liaison, but they'll have a care transitions coordinator or care transitions manager. And so they're kind of like salespeople, and then they're kind of responsible for moving patients through the care continuum. And there are companies like Navi Health a lot of people are going for Navi Health right now. It's super competitive. I think it was just bought out by Optum. But they have a lot of roles like skilled inpatient care coordinator and pre-service coordinator. And so those roles tend to be about the same or slightly higher pay than clinicians. But if you're in like the killing it in the home health world, it might not match what you were making. And so really, if you want to be making like upwards of 100K per year, you're going to be looking at higher education, upper, like program directors of DPT programs. You're going to be looking at high level compliance roles. compliance is just like making sure that hospitals have their rehab departments I's dotted and T's checked, and everybody's licenses are in check, and everybody has their CPR certification. So some of those roles don't pay so well when you first want to take them. They're going to either be a lateral move or even sometimes a slight pay cut. But then as you move up, you have more potential to earn more. Same goes for any management role, where you've probably heard horror stories where somebody goes into management and it's like the worst hell on earth, and they want to stab their own eyes out, because not only are they having to do 8 hours of patient care every day, they have to be a manager on top of it. And they got this great raise that when you do the math is like really a pay cut. And so for those managers, I do find a lot of times people get stuck at that sort of lower middle management position because they're put in a position where they can't be super successful, and then they burn out, and then they want out of management. And so if that's the case, I recommend you get a mentor, because if you can move past that position, yes, you might need extra education, certification, you might need to stick your neck out and say that you want more opportunities, but you can definitely make a lot in we all know that CEOs make bank. And so that's one track to take. I call that kind of operations, compliance. There's a little bit of overlap with operations and compliance, but there are so many different ways you can go. And even entrepreneurship, you can this wasn't the case for the first couple of years, but I'm definitely making more than I did as a clinician. And I think that's because I look at entrepreneurship as I put people's needs first. I figure out what they want, and then I figure out, is there a way to create a product where someone can get what they want, and I make a profit at the same time, and it's like win-win. Mm-hmm. And so I think if you do it the right way with entrepreneurship and you don't smell of slime, sort of, then you can do that too. And it's kind of like recruiting or sales, though. You have to be the type that wants to wake up and get to your computer and start working, which, again, full circle, I find it super ironic that I ended up in a role where I'm in front of a computer all day. Yeah. I left that for PT.
Yep, kind of full circle.
Yeah. But I'm also older, so that maybe that's it.
So now you're your own boss, and I think that's yeah. Some people out there want that, right? Yeah. And I think there's a lot that don't even have a clue about some of these non-clinical opportunities that you just mentioned. I hadn't heard about 3 or 4 of them for sure.
Yeah.
And not that that's the route I necessarily want to take completely, but I do like to dabble in different areas, right? So hearing those things, I know a lot of people are interested in that.
Yeah. And there's so much more than that. And I really am of the belief that you can be successful and make a lot of money in pretty much anything, because you see piano teachers who have figured out a way to teach piano lessons remotely, and they're killing it. And so I always think that if you're taking a role, that's why I always give that kind of caveat. If you're taking a role like sales because you want more money, don't jump straight for it, because it's not for everyone. It's for some people. Some people love it and they will never go back, but you can still make a lot of money going into a rehab liaison job. If you sign up with the right company, even though it's pretty much a lateral move with pay, if you sign up with a company where they have a really nice bonus structure in place and you're really good at that kind of role, then you can make more than you did as a clinician, hand over fist, as they would say. And you don't have to then be traveling all across the world. I keep saying travel, but that's because right now we're in a pandemic and nobody really wants to get on the plane right now. So
sure. Yeah. Listen, you're 100% right. All right. So one more question for you. And I ask this to everyone that comes on the show. Where do you see your career in the next 10 years expanding? Right. So obviously you've started the non-clinical PT, you're having success with it. Where do you see yourself being in 10 years? Do you see yourself still doing this? Are you branching out? What does that look like to you?
I don't see myself doing anything else, to be honest. I love what I do. I thought that, believe me, some of the comments that I got from others and from myself when I was not loving being a PT made me realize that maybe I had a terrible work ethic and I'm a bad person. I just don't like working. I'm lazy. And I've proven to myself and to, I think, those people, I definitely love working. I love what I do. I just had to be doing something that I truly loved. So I see in 10 years from now, probably not working as much, I definitely still am checking emails on weekends. Sometimes I way better about it than I was this time last year. It's like it's a work in progress. But yeah, definitely I'd like to be maybe working 2 or 3 days a week and just kind of adding oil to the machine and keeping everything in check. And I definitely would like to keep doing what I've been doing, which is just collaborating with people when the opportunity arises. So when I meet someone who's had a really cool career and they've been in it for long enough and they enjoy teaching and mentoring, then I like the idea of, okay, well, let's collaborate. Let's do I have my course, which is a 101 level, non-clinical 101. But if someone's gone through the course and they know for a fact they want to go into compliance, I'd love to team up with someone in compliance, and we do just a 6-week coaching program, that kind of thing. And that's the kind of stuff that I see coming in the future. But when I was leaving NGPT, it was heartbreaking because I thought that was kind of like my home and I had built in it. It was my baby. And now this is my new baby. And so I feel like, I am probably going to watch this baby grow up and go to college one day.
No, that's cool. It's cool to see your journey, how you did that, because it probably gives a lot of people hope for, hey, you don't have to hit it right off the bat. It might take some time, but there's a lot of opportunities out there if you're willing to put, the work in and the time to find out what you're passionate about and what you enjoy doing.
Amen. I honestly think that's the best advice that you could give someone, is to just say, don't. Some people are like, I've known my husband, for example, he knew he wanted to be an engineer when he was 8, and he's been on that track forever. And he's like same company for almost 20 years. That is crazy, right? Crazy. But I think a lot of us beat ourselves up, especially the type 3s. I would guess maybe you're a type 3. I'm just guessing. But the type 3s, yeah, who are really driven by achievement. I think it's really hard when they start something and they think it's going to be so good, and then it's like, okay, maybe this isn't really the right thing, and then you have to start all over. It's like really demoralizing. But I think that's the best thing you can do, because everything that you start and try, it does lead somewhere and culminate in something really great for your life. And even if it's not work related, you can take all those lessons that you've learned. Even as PTs, I always tell people, I feel like my brain changed. Like my work ethic and my brain were rewired by PT in a good way to be able to just really be able to work with any type of person, deal with any personality type. I'm sure you can relate. Yeah. And just to be able to think and rethink on the fly and say, this isn't working. What else can we do? And that is something that PTs have. It is a gift. And if you embrace it and see that your career can be very, very much like a tomato plant, or it's just branching out everywhere, or it can be like a tree. Whatever you want, you really can do it. You just have to be able to accept the failures as they come and learn from them, and then take the successes and sort of lean into them and work with people you trust too. That's the other thing. If you go in an entrepreneurship route, I got that advice really early on from a good friend, and it's so important. Just don't work with people just because they want to work with you and think what you're doing is cool. Work with people you trust, and you have to trust each other. And one last thing about branding that you had asked me earlier that I forgot to say, if that's okay, just show up consistently. I think that's the most important thing for any business you do is just show up consistently, use the same type of tone in your voice, try to use the same fonts over and over in your website. In WordPress, you can take the theme sometimes, and you can change it so that all of your heading tags are the same color and the same font. And so that way you don't have to be thinking about it all the time. Oh, what do I use? Helvetica 14 point. You can just kind of set it as a heading, H2 or H3, and then everything looks the same across your site. And I know that sounds really simple, just like white space, but showing up consistently with the same font, the same colors, the same type of sort of tone in your text, in how your images look, that goes a long way, because people feel like they can trust you, and they can trust you because you're going to keep showing up and you're not going to be a jerk and like sell them out. So
that's great advice. It really is. For those that want to see more information on some of these non-clinical roles, or just want to hear more from you, subscribe to your email list, whatever it may be, how do they find you? What's the best way to find you and get more information from you?
Sure. The easiest way is just to go to the website, thenonclinicalpt.com, or you can also search me. I have a couple of Facebook groups. I know they're linked from my website, but I don't know how easy it is to find at this point because I think they're kind of buried. So you can also go, if you're a Facebook person, you can go onto Facebook and look at, it's Non-Clinical Networking for Rehab Professionals with a dash, non-clinical networking for rehab professionals. That's a networking group. It's free. I have non-clinical job postings for rehab professionals. That's also a free Facebook group. And yeah, I do have an email list. You can sign up. I have a free mini course on my website that's just the primer, the kind of thing that we dipped our toe in a minute ago with, oh, don't jump into sales just because it makes a lot of money. It's the big picture where you can really look at yourself and your strengths and your interests and your talents and understand the big picture of what happens when you do decide that you want to leave the clinic, but still kind of maintain life in healthcare somehow. Yeah. Toe dipped in. And I'm trying to think if there's anywhere else. LinkedIn, Instagram, I'm everywhere.
Nice.
Social
nice.
media. Yeah.
That's great. All those things to connect with you. Thank you so much for coming on the show. This has been great to hear about all these different opportunities, your journey, all the cool opportunities and different things you can do as a PT. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me. It was great chatting with you.
Absolutely. All right, everyone, that's it for today's episode. If you want to see more, go ahead and check out all her links. See her at the Non-Clinical PT. Take care.